Hello fellow intelligent investors, my name is René Salman, and in today's video I want to discuss what I would do if I woke up broke tomorrow. What would I do if I would wake up one morning and notice that everything was gone? There's no money in my bank account, there are no investments, no retirement funds, no mortgage-free house or property, and generally no other financial assets. I think this is an interesting thought experiment to highlight some fundamental personal finance and wealth building principles. So without further ado, let's get started.
Have you ever wondered how you can make your hard-earned money work for you? Have you ever dreamed of building generational wealth and leaving a legacy? My name is René Salman, and I'll teach you how you can manage and invest your money with confidence, a long-term vision, and without losing your mind. Join me on my journey of intelligent investing and learn how smart people can compound their money effectively and accumulate wealth.
Alright, now before I share the 7 things that I would do if I had to start all over again, I'm curious, what would you do if you would wake up one morning with a net worth of $0? Let me know in the comments down below what you would do in order to change this financial situation, and share your tips with the community that we have here on this channel. Alright, and so if I would have to share what I would do, the first thing I would do is to develop some finance related goals. I think goals are incredibly important in life in general, but maybe more importantly also when it comes to building wealth and forming the right mindset for financial success. I know it might sound a little cheesy or a little cliche, but I truly believe that goals can help you to turn your dreams into reality. And I do think that financial goals are somewhat special because achieving financial success usually doesn't come overnight. No, it takes extreme discipline, dedication, and repeated sacrifice for a sustained period of time. And thus, I think one should also distinguish between short-term goals that maybe can help you to build momentum and longer-term goals that you might only be able to reach or achieve in 20 to 30 years. And obviously, one of these longer-term goals would, for me personally, be to become financially independent. Don't get me wrong here, I really love working and I couldn't imagine just sitting at home doing nothing. But nonetheless, I value the idea of not having to work. And thus, this would certainly be a long-term goal for me, and that would get me excited to work very hard to get there. And in addition to that, as we are just speaking of goal setting as an effective tool to realize your dreams, let me just mention that I would also incorporate some proven goal setting principles when I would develop and write down my goals, such as the SMART goal setting principles. I think incorporating these elements would force me to take a more strategic approach, and it would add structure and trackability to my goals and objectives. And also I would write my goals down, because there's actually research that proves that writing down your goals increases your odds of actually achieving them. Alright, with that out of the way, let me share the second thing that I would do if I would wake up broke one morning. Well, the second thing I would need to take care of is to make sure I find a job, because this would be my absolutely top priority. I mean, I would have no choice but to start earning money, because without some form of income source, I would be in major trouble very soon. I would not be able to afford my rent, I would not be able to afford groceries, I would not be able to pay for my bills, and so on and so forth. And maybe most importantly, I would have no chance of reaching my financial goals without a job. What you need to realize here is that at the end of the day, the formula to becoming rich, to becoming wealthy, is actually not that complicated. It's actually rather simple in nature. First, you need to earn money. You then need to save a certain percentage of the money you earn. And finally, you need to invest your savings in some type of asset that is appreciating in value. So once I would have some kind of income source, this would make the process of building wealth much easier. And personally, I would probably take a full-time job to rebuild my net worth as quickly as possible. And this shouldn't be too hard for me personally. I think I've mentioned this in previous videos. I work as a teacher and in Germany, so this is where I live. Becoming a teacher is actually not that easy, as you basically have to study for around 4 to 5 years, and then you have to do a teacher training program that takes you another 18 months approximately. And as I personally would also be rather flexible in terms of where I could work or where I could see myself living, and as I've graduated with pretty good grades, I would be fairly confident that I would be able to find a job relatively quickly. Now, obviously, if you have an entrepreneurial spirit, if you have a specific skill, or maybe you have already some experience running your own business, you might be able to start your own business right away and be self-employed. And this could, of course, be a compelling alternative that might enable you to reach your financial goals more quickly. Okay, next up, let's focus on step number 3. Well, I would probably take a rather radical approach in terms of my savings rate, at least in my first few years. Because what you need to realize is that the best way to build wealth is to save and invest regularly over a long period of time. The time you have to invest is by far the most powerful wealth building tool available to all of us. And it's the most valuable asset you have. Starting to save and invest at a young age, or as early as possible, allows you to take advantage of the power of compounding. In a way, you can think of it as a money printing machine. Every dollar you throw in the machine today will magically be multiplied by that machine. And 10 years later, the machine might throw out $2.50 for every dollar you inserted in the machine 10 years ago. And after 20 years, the machine might throw out $8. And this means that the money you save in your first few years is actually more valuable than the money you stash away a year or two before actually reaching retirement. And this is why I would want to get the snowball rolling as quickly as possible. And I would place a lot of emphasis on saving as much as possible in my first few years. And I would try to get to my first $100,000 as quickly as possible. As Charlie Munger has put it, the first 100,000 is the hardest, but you gotta do it. And you gotta do whatever it takes to get there. So at least initially, I would be very conscious about my spending habits, and I would try to spend as little as possible. Or put differently, save as much as possible. I would absolutely aim for a savings rate of around 50%. And once I would have gotten the financial snowball rolling, then I would gradually become less intense about my savings rate and focus more on the investment returns that I am able to achieve. As I would hit certain milestones, say the first $100,000, maybe the first $200,000, and so on and so forth, I would be willing to spend more money in categories where I was rather radical in my first few years. I would be more likely to spend money on expensive hotels, or maybe more generally speaking, expensive vacations, or would be willing to eat out more frequently, to give you a few examples here. Now, a 50% savings rate might seem ambitious to some of you. Well, and I think this brings me to the fourth thing that I would do if I would wake up broke tomorrow. Personally, I'm a big fan of Ramit Sethi, who's basically an American personal finance guru. And he suggests that you should focus on the big wins first. And this is what I would do if I would wake up broke without any financial assets one day. And what Sethi means by that is that you should basically focus on the big money decisions, the ones that can save you thousands of dollars, and not the tiny ones that maybe save you a buck here and a buck there. So instead of denying myself a latte when I would be out with my friends or with family, I would focus on my major expenses first. And this would include spending categories such as housing, means of transportation, or insurance policies. Because usually very few expenses make up the lion's share of the money that you are spending over the course of a lifetime. And I would probably try to reduce my costs in these areas as much as possible, at least in the first few years. So I would probably move in a smaller apartment in a less expensive neighborhood or city even. And I wouldn't own a car unless I would really need one to get to my job. And I would use public transportation instead. Especially if you live in a city, chances are that you can easily live car-free. Because many jobs, grocery stores and schools can likely be reached within minutes from your home. Or you could at least take the bike and get there, within 15 to 20 minutes. And commuting by bicycle may actually be a great way to live a more stress-free life. In my first few years, I would probably also scale back on vacations, on subscription services, on fancy restaurant visits and other luxury treats or items such as maybe fancy furniture or electronic gadgets. For instance, I would rather go camping, hiking and biking, say in the Austrian Alps, as opposed to being in a luxury resort on Mykonos. There are so many awesome activities that are basically for free or at least pretty cheap. Reading books comes to mind, or blogs even. Hiking, playing video games or board games with friends and family, going for a run, playing tennis, watching YouTube, having barbecue outside with friends. I think you get the idea. Personally, I believe that at the end of the day, it's not the price of an activity that determines how much fun you will have. No, it's your attitude. I think you could spend thousands of dollars on the ultimate luxury vacation, and you could have a terrible time just because say there's a hair in your soup or the temperature of the pool is not ideal. And likewise, you could have the time of your life simply canoeing and camping with your friends in say Scandinavia, even though it might be raining all day long. It really is your attitude that matters. So in the first few years, I would really be trying to optimize all of my major expenses. And I would track my expenses too, making sure that I set aside enough money to throw into that money printing machine that I mentioned earlier. All right, the fifth thing that I would do is I would focus intensely on finding ways to boost my income. As I understand the power of compound interest, I want to put my money to work as early as possible. I think I've made that clear. And as much as possible, obviously. Unfortunately, cutting costs only goes so far and has its limit. But being able to earn, say, an extra $500, $1,000 or even $2,000 a month can obviously go a lot further. As Buffett has pointed out, invest as much in yourself as you can. You are your biggest asset by far. Your biggest asset is your ability to earn money. If you are able to grow your human capital, you can invest more money over time and become financially independent more quickly. So I would try to think of ways to increase my income. This could be a side hustle, for example. It could be overtime or bonuses in your corporate job. And nowadays, the internet obviously offers you many opportunities as well. I think a quick Google search should get you a great list of ideas. Now, at the beginning of the video, I outlined that in order to become wealthy, you have to earn money. You have to spend less than you earn and you have to start saving. And that's great. But the sad truth is that most people will only ever work for money because they don't know how to make money work for them. Let's say I would be able to stash away $1,500 a month. If I do that for 30 years, when I eventually retire, I will have $540,000 in my savings account. Unfortunately, over a 30-year period, inflation will substantially reduce the purchasing power of that $540,000. So while it might seem like a lot of money at first, if I would just leave the money in a savings account once I reach retirement, this cash pile will also slowly melt away. If I do not drastically change my lifestyle, and if I would need the money to finance my everyday expenses. So obviously, a high savings rate alone does not lead to financial independence, especially if you just leave your money in a savings account or just put it under your mattress. If you do that, the value of the money actually decreases over time. So clearly, investing your money is the single most effective way to eventually build wealth and become rich. And I would invest my money in assets, in productive assets that grow in value over time. And personally, I would obviously allocate all of my savings to stocks, because this is where I have my expertise. And I also understand that over the long run, there is no better performing asset class than stocks. I like the way Brian Feroldi recently put it on Twitter. Even though stocks are often perceived as risky, this is a major misconception. The stock market isn't risky. The stock market only becomes risky when your holding period isn't long enough. So no mortgage for me, no bonds, no rental property, and also no crypto, obviously, just stocks. What I try to do is I always try to imagine that every dollar I spend to invest, to buy stocks, for example, every dollar is like a little worker. And that worker has the ability to magically produce more workers. And over the long run, one worker could potentially develop hundreds of more workers for me. Personally, I believe that the rich tend to get richer because they are continually reinvesting their asset profits, such as dividends, back into new cash generative assets. Yeah, and if you want to keep it super simple here and stick to the KISS principle, so keep it simple, stupid, I think you can simply invest in 1 or 2 index funds, dollar cost average, meaning you invest an equal amount in those ETFs or indices at regular intervals, and then you just relax. Obviously, it makes sense to first set up an emergency fund, or maybe to set aside some money for your kids' education, but I didn't want to get into too many details in this video. Now, the last thing that I would do if I would wake up broke tomorrow is I would reward myself along the way. I think it is highly important to celebrate reaching certain milestones. Every time I would reach one of my short-term, medium-term or long-term goals, I would reward myself with small things for my short-term goals and bigger rewards for the goals that require prolonged sacrifice and hard work. All the short-term pain and stress will eventually pay off. I would be sure of that. But I would want to make the journey of building wealth a lot more fun by giving me an incentive to really work towards that goal. And I think this is basic psychology. When a specific behavior is followed by a pleasant outcome, you are more likely to repeat that behavior in the future because you want to experience that pleasant outcome again. So you basically are trying to trick your brain. All right, before I come to my conclusion, please let me know in the comments down below what you would do differently and whether you approve the tips that I gave in this video. Which one is the most important step in your view? Let me know down below what you think. So, I guess the bottom line here is that I would go hardcore in the first few years until I would hit my first smaller milestones. I would want to get that wealth building snowball rolling as quickly as possible because at the end of the day, building wealth is shockingly simple as long as you stick to a few fundamental wealth building principles. Now, I think this thought experiment also has the benefit that you can remind yourself how good you might already have it if you are already well underway on your wealth building journey. How good you have it compared to the effort you had to put in and the sacrifices you had to make in those early years of your wealth building journey. I would say personally I'm still fairly early on my journey. Essentially, I only started learning about personal finance and investing around 3 to 4 years ago. Nobody taught me anything about these topics in school or university. But I've already hit a major milestone quite recently, and I think I can take the foot off the gas a little bit now. I'm generally not a proponent of a super frugal lifestyle, because I think such a lifestyle only suits a good handful of personalities. But I do believe that being conscious about your spending habits and not being obsessed with consumption is a prerequisite to become wealthy, especially if you are starting with nothing. Right, and I think I should wrap it up here. So as always, may your finances and investments prosper. I see you in my next video. Good luck.